Hi everyone, my name is Ruth and I'll be walking us through our Shibori dyeing process today. Now, Shibori is a traditional Japanese resist dyeing process that produces these really beautiful, really intricate patterns in fabric. It's a really old tradition with a long history that's still practiced all over the world today. Now, shibori actually means to wring, to squeeze, or to press. So it basically refers to how you prepare the fabric for the dyeing process. So if you look in your illustrated instructions, you'll see a page that talks a little bit about the shibori history, but also has a few examples of some of the most common, most popular traditional shibori folds. What we're going to do today is practice this old tradition, but in a very unconventional way. We're going to use a couple supplies that aren't typically thought of when you think of art making, right? We're going to use a microwave and steamer bags. Now, if you don't have a microwave, that's completely okay. I'll be demoing how to do this process with a microwave and how to do this process without a microwave. The thing you're going to need without the microwave is boiled water. So go ahead and put that kettle on. We're going to let the steam do the work for us today. So in front of me, I have a couple examples of how your silk might turn out. This process we're doing today focuses on the wringing of shibori and the immersing. And so the wringing produces this really nice kind of intricate pattern in the fabric. It's not a pattern that's copied consistently. It's a very imperfect pattern, but there's a lot of beauty in that, I think. Every time I've done this, it's produced different results that are all beautiful. I've never been disappointed with this project at all. So there's no way to really screw it up. Know that. But these are a couple examples of how your silks might turn out today. Now let's go ahead and talk about some of the supplies that we need. The first thing we'll always need are going to be our illustrated instructions. So if you have your illustrated instructions, go ahead and pull those out. We'll be looking at number 3, the Shibori immersion dyeing. Now, just like all our other illustrated instructions, right at the top will be a list of supplies that we need, and then step by step how to do that process. Now, if you don't have a microwave, again, that's completely okay. In your illustrated instructions is a list of instructions on an alternative method. Still has the same thing, a list of supplies that you need, and then step by step, that dyeing process. We're going to be walking through both of them today, so no worries if you have a microwave or not. The next thing we need is going to be that piece of silk. So go ahead and pull that piece of silk out. It's going to be the piece that's really thin and in a little plastic bag. It'll have the letters H88 on it. And that's going to be the silk we're using today. It's a nice big rectangle piece, so it'll work really well for us. Go ahead and pull that silk out. The next thing we need is going to be our pigment pack. So in your kit, we used it before, is that pigment pack. It's got Dharma Trading on the front. And so inside, you'll see 3 different colors. The cobalt blue, which is very similar in color to the traditional indigo dye that's used in shibori. There's also a pretty yellow and fuchsia. Go ahead and pull those out. We're not going to use all 3 of them. This is a one dye project. So pick the one that you like the most. We're going to use that one today. But go ahead and pull that pigment pack out. The next thing we need is going to be that steamer bag. Now in your kit, it's going to be in that gallon Ziploc bag, but it's this little plastic bag that has this black strip across the top. Go ahead and pull that one out. We're going to be using that today to kind of lock in the steam so it dyes our silk. So we'll need that steamer bag. The next thing you need out of the kit are going to be those disposable gloves. The dye we're using today can get a little messy, but as long as we're aware of our space, aware of our body, typically that keeps the accidents to a minimum. Now the pigment we're using, it can get on your hands. That's okay. It will come off with a couple washings of just soap and water. It may stain you for a little bit, but it will come out. It's good to wear the gloves anyway, because that keeps that dye kind of contained and protects our hands. While we're talking about space, protecting ourselves, I want to mention too, because the dye, it's pigment and it can get a little messy, it's always good to wear either an apron or a shirt that you don't mind getting a little messy. Like I said, as long as we're aware of our space and aware of our body, typically that keeps the accidents to a minimum. But you could be like me. I get pretty messy. I get really into what I'm doing. So sometimes that mess gets a little big. One thing that I use to kind of help contain my space is I work on a piece of foil that helps me kind of contain my mess, keep it all together. So if you have a piece of foil or wax paper, some newspaper, something like that, that'll help keep you kind of contained in one space. There are a couple other things that are really helpful when doing this project. They're not included in the kit. And one of them, of course, is that pre-soak. So go ahead and get a small container out for the pre-soak. We just need a little bit of water, not too much, just enough water to kind of cover the silk we're using. And while we're talking about the pre-soak, if you have some white vinegar, go ahead and pull that out too. White vinegar is a helping hand when it comes to the pre-soak. It's not necessary, but it's really helpful. It helps those fibers open up and latch onto that pigment. So if you do have the white vinegar, definitely use it. If you don't have it, it's completely okay. But go ahead and get that stuff out for pre-soak. We'll also need a microwave safe container. So what I'm using today is just kind of a little to-go bag container that had like to-go food in it. It's not something that I use for food, but it's something that's microwave safe. And so that's what we're going to need today. If you're putting it in the microwave, you'll need a microwave safe bowl. If you're not using the microwave, you'll just need a space to kind of hold the bag. All right. And then, of course, the next thing we need is the microwave or the boiled water. So let's go ahead and jump in and get started with this process. I'm going to go ahead and add a little water for my pre-soak. Now, I'm doing maybe a cup and a half. We don't need a whole lot, like I said, because that pre-soak that we're doing just need enough to cover that silk. So go ahead and add that water in there. I have some vinegar, so I'm going to go ahead and add that too. For the amount of water I'm using, I'm going to do about a tablespoon of vinegar. Again, you don't need a lot, just enough to cover that piece of silk that you're doing. Now, I'm going to be demoing how to do it in the microwave and how to do it without the microwave. So I'm going to put both two silks in there today. But go ahead and pull your silk out, kind of bunch it up and stick it in that pre-soak. All right. And like I said, you don't need a whole lot of water, just enough for that pre-soak to get started. Now, the purpose of the pre-soak is to help open those fibers up so they're ready to take the dye. Now, with any dyeing process you do, whether it's like tie-dye, shibori, like what we're doing, batiking, mud cloth printing, ice dyeing, reverse tie-dye, whatever it is you're doing, you're going to need to pre-soak your fabric first. That's always a good first step. And like I said, it's because it helps those fibers open up so they can take the dye. You don't need a long time, just a few minutes or so. If we look at the illustrated instructions, that first step is to pre-soak. It suggests about 10 to 15 minutes, which is a good amount of time. But generally, if you're anywhere from 5 minutes to 30 minutes, that's enough time. You don't want to do more than 30 minutes, but anywhere from 5 to 30 minutes is going to be good. So we're going to let that sit for just a moment, and we'll come back after the pre-soak and get started with the dyeing. All right. Now that we've let our silk pre-soak for just a bit, we're going to go ahead and wring it out. Right. So if we look at our illustrated instructions, whether you're doing the microwave or no microwave, we're still going to do the same next steps. And that first one is to wring out that silk. We're going to twist it and tie it in a couple knots. So go ahead and start pulling your silk out. Squeeze out as much water as you can. We want our silk damp, but we don't want it dripping. So squeeze out as much as you can. And again, I'm going to be demoing how to do it with a microwave and without a microwave. So you'll be able to see both of them in real time. So go ahead and squeeze those silks out. And I'm going to set that pre-soak aside. I'm going to lift up this for a little bit. All right. So our next step is we're going to take that silk and just kind of open it up, right? And once you open it up, it may take a minute, but once you open it up, we're going to go ahead and fold it. Fold it in half. So we have a shorter piece, something that's a little easier to work with. And it doesn't have to be super perfect. Again, Shibori, there's something nice about doing these Shibori folds because there's real beauty in the imperfection of it, right? So it doesn't have to be exact, but go ahead and fold your piece in half so it's a little smaller. And what we're going to do is I'm going to hold one end in my hand, and with the other end, I'm going to start twisting, right? So I'm twisting it up, and I'm going to twist it as tight as I can. And so what this is doing is it's going to start folding this in a way that it makes a resist pattern when the dye is added. So the tighter the wrinkles, the more patterning you're going to get. The looser the wrinkles, the more solid your color is going to be. So kind of twist it up. And you're going to twist it pretty tight because it's going to want to start twisting up on itself, just like this. And that's what you want. Once it gets twisted up like this, we'll go ahead and tie it in a couple knots. So mine was in such a way I could tie it in 2 knots. So I'm going to do that. Now I'll show again what we're supposed to do, what we're going to do. We're going to take that silk, open it up, and fold it in half. So you've got a more manageable piece to work with. Now it may not be perfect, and that's okay. But again, we'll take that, and with one hand, we'll hold it. With the other hand, we're going to start that twisting process. Right, so we're just twisting, twisting, twisting. We're making sure it's as tight as we can get it. We want to twist it tight enough that it starts to wrap up on itself. And that's how you know you're in a good spot. So twist it pretty tightly. And again, this is what's going to produce that patterned result. Okay, let it twist up on itself, twisting, and then we'll tie it in the knot. And because we're using silk, it'll come out, that knot will come out pretty easily. So we've got our knot, right? So now that next step, step 3, is going to be adding that knotted silk into our steamer bag and adding that pigment. So whether you're doing the microwave or the boiled water, we'll do this next step the same. So you'll take out that steamer bag, open it up, and stick that silk in there, right? And again, that steamer bag is the one that has that black strip across the top. And this is just a regular steamer bag. It's for steaming vegetables. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it at the grocery store. It's pretty inexpensive, but it's a one-time use thing, but it works really well for locking in that steam. And that steam is the thing that's doing the dyeing. And so we're going to let that sit in there. I'm going to pull out another one too, so you can see how to do it with a microwave and without one. But we're just putting that knot in there. Okay. Next, we're going to add the pigment. Now, your pigment packs are pretty large. There's a 1 ounce in each of them, but we're only going to use about 1/4 of a teaspoon. This pigment is so concentrated, so you don't need a whole lot of it. So I'm going to use, for the one in the microwave, I'm going to use that pink, and I'm going to add just 1/4 of a teaspoon and kind of dump it right on top. There's no fancy way to do that. It's just scooping it up and putting it right on top. And then for the one that's not going in the microwave, I'm going to do the cobalt blue, but still the same way, taking 1/4 of a teaspoon and dumping it right on top. All right, so once we add our pigment, if you are using the microwave, let's say my pink one, I'm going to take half a cup of water. So it can be water right out of the faucet. You don't want it to be super cold. So like a room temperature or slightly warm is okay, but you'll get half a cup and just kind of pour it on top. Okay. And once you pour that on top, we'll take that black strip and peel it off. And then just kind of fold it over and seal it. Okay, and this is the one that's going in the microwave. So I'm going to take my microwave safe container and just kind of pick it up and set it in there. Now for the one that's not going in the microwave, we're going to need that boiled water. We don't want boiling water, but we want boiled water. So I have my electric kettle was heating up. I'm going to go grab it really quickly. All right, and we're going to do the same amount of water, just half a cup of that boiled water. And I'm going to put it in that steamer bag right on top of that pigment. And then I'll do the same thing. I'm going to pull that black strip off and then fold it over. And you can see that steam is already starting to collect. I'm just going to take it and set it inside here. Okay. So after you put that boiled water in there, you want to agitate it just a moment to get that pigment around. And then we're going to let that sit for a while. Now, if you're using the microwave, let's go ahead and take your steamer bag of silk and we're going to put it in the microwave for 2 minutes, right? So if we look at the illustrated instructions, after we add that pigment in the water, we're going to go over to that microwave. We've got our bag and a microwave safe container, right? We're going to stick it in the microwave for 2 minutes. So I'm going to go take mine over here for 2 minutes. All right. And then if you're not using the microwave, we'll look at that one. After you add the silk, the pigment, and the boiled water, that half a cup of boiled water, you'll just put it in I'm just keeping mine in a bowl just in case there's a little leak. But I'm going to let that steam do all the work, sealing it up and let it sit for about 10 minutes. We want to give it enough time so that steam starts like making that dye, loosening that dye up so it kind of latches onto that silk. That steam is doing all the work for us today. And you can see the bag is filling with steam. That's what we want, right? That steam is doing all the work. It's getting that dye to latch onto that pigment. When it comes to dyeing, we're going to let this rest for just a moment, about a minute, and then we're going to put it back in the microwave. But I want to say when it comes to dyeing fibers, heat locks things in. Cold kind of rinses away the excess dye. And so when we're done with everything and we rinse it out, we want to use the cold water for rinsing, but that heat is going to help us set it. So at the end of every dyeing project, I talk about how we need to do the heat set, either by putting it in the dryer for a few minutes, adding a little blow dryer heat, an iron, steam it for a little bit. Doing that little bit of heat really locks that pigment in. And so we're kind of using that with this process, whether you're doing the microwave or not. That steam is helping lock in that dye, right? And so seeing the steam in the bag is what you want to see. Now your bag may balloon up a little bit, it may fill up, and that's good. We're steaming it just like we would steam vegetables. It's okay for that bag to get bigger. We're pulling it out for 1 minute to let it rest, let the bag deflate, and then we're going to stick it back in for another 2 minutes. Now that's the microwave one. Now, just as a reminder for the one that's not in the microwave, we're letting that sit for about 10 minutes. We're not going to touch it. We're just going to let the steam that collected in that bag really do its work. We're going to wait till it gets to about room temperature, which again will be about 10 minutes. So after a minute, let's take our bag and put it back in the microwave for another 2 minutes. So after the next 2 minutes, we're going to pull that out of the microwave. Let me go grab mine. All right. Now be careful. It may be a little hot to the touch. You may have to use oven mitts to pull it out. But you can see that steam is still working in here. My bag was inflated and it's going to slowly deflate. Now, what we're waiting for now is for these pieces to cool down to room temperature, right? And so once they cool down to room temperature, we'll be able to go to the next step. Let's take a look at our illustrated instructions. So we're microwaving it for about 2 minutes, pulling it out, letting it rest for a minute, and then doing again for another 2 minutes. After that second 2 minutes, we'll pull it out, like I said, and let it rest. We want it to rest until it's room temperature, and then we can remove it from the steamer bag and rinse it with cold water. Now, when it comes to the steamer bag that we didn't put in the microwave, that one is kind of the same process. We're going to let that silk cool down to room temperature. It'll take about 10 minutes, right? And so after that, you'll be able to touch it. You can pull it out of the steamer bag and rinse it in cold water. It may take a while for this to cool down to room temperature, so we'll just chat about how to do that. So when you do pull it out, when it comes to gets to room temperature, I'll set that aside. You'll take your silk, open the steamer bag. You can go to the sink. Just dump it down the sink. It's just half a cup, so it's not going to do any damage. But pour it down the sink, and then we'll start squeezing. Let that cold water run and start squeezing that silk. This is where the gloves will come in handy. That dye transfer, even from rinsing it out, can get on your hands and can stain. Again, if it does, it's okay. It'll come off with a couple washings of soap and water. But go ahead, you can put your gloves on to rinse it. You have that cold water running down and you're just kind of squeezing it with the knot. You're letting that excess pigment run out. Now, remember I said in the beginning, heat helps set, cold helps wash away that excess dye. So the silk can only pick up so much pigment, right? And so we need that cold water to get rid of all the extra stuff so it doesn't transfer if you're wearing it, right? And so using that cold water and just squeezing it out. And then once you get it squeezed, you'll open it up from the knot and start squeezing it again. Now you're going to do this until the water runs clear, right? It may take a little while, but it's definitely worth it. You're getting out, like I said, all that extra pigment, so the dye will run clear and you won't get that transfer either on your clothes or on your body. These make beautiful gifts. I always like to make them to give away because they're a fun, easy process, and they're really beautiful. People seem to like them a lot. Like I said, they produce some really lovely patterns in the silk, and so they're really nice to wear, and just really beautiful. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us at contact@mather.com or show us on your Facebook page, our Facebook page. We'd love to see all your work. Excited about continuing this process on. As I said, just a quick reminder, once it cools down to room temperature, you can rinse it out with cool water, cold water, and let it rinse until that water runs clear. You'll want to let it hang dry. And once it's hang dried completely, you can do that heat set, either putting it in the dryer for a few minutes, using a steamer or an iron, just giving it a little heat to help lock in that pigment.